what we've discovered is that up to 40% of the ground is actually made up of carbon. The hypothesis is that New Zealand could be carbon neutral.
Kia ora and welcome back to Care Beyond Profits. Today I'm so thrilled to be joined by Paul Button. He was a raft guide in Whistler and he came back in 2017 to New Zealand. Now he runs Canopy Tours as their CEO. It's the first B Corp in Bay of Plenty and it has a zip line through the ancient forest of 12 years of pest control underneath it.
Well, we've got these forests with the potential to soak in gigatons of carbon if they were healthy. We take this land that had no strategic value for them and we've made it healthy. The challenge is that, we pay 6% for revenue, but then we also have the pleasure of spending whatever we spend, like $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 on restoring the land for them.
What really got me in this episode was the carbon. Half of his forest had been 12 years of trapping and the other half hasn't. The restored side is up by 40% of ground composition. The hypothesis is that if New Zealand was predator-free, we could be carbon neutral. Could this really be true? Be watching to see what Paul has to say.
It's not about what you do some of the time, it's about what you do most of the time. As a boss, it's about being consistent, leading by example. All we crave for is just connection, right? What people want is actually just someone to be nice to them.
If you're enjoying this episode of Care Beyond Profits, please like, share and subscribe below. It's free and it's the best way that you can support bringing more inspiring stories of leaders who care beyond profits. Let's get into it. Paul, thank you so much for joining me today.
All right, kia ora. Really nice to be here.
Lovely to have you here, and also lovely that you're just in Rotorua, which is not too far away from where I am, which is quite nice for a change.
No, of course, we could have met up actually, but
yeah. Totally. Before we get in, I want you to forget your title for a second. If I was to meet you at a barbecue, I didn't know anything about you, who would I be sitting across from? Who is Paul?
Good question. I've never actually been asked that. Paul is, I think, a really nice man, a really nice guy that loves his family and loves being active and is really engaging and inquisitive.
And what does family look like for yourself?
I've got a lovely wife and then two beautiful kids, 13 and 16 years, a girl 16 and a boy 13. Girl loves dance and drama and smashes the gym, and the boy loves riding bikes and playing cricket, actually. And then he also loves the Warriors too, although he doesn't play rugby league, but he's definitely on the Warriors train.
It sounds like a very outdoorsy family and going into the teen life as well. So definitely a different phase that you're starting up there.
Yeah, it's exciting. And in some ways it's quite sad, right? Because of how quickly they grow up. So you definitely get reminded how you got to make the most every day.
Yeah, no, totally. And in terms of your family prior to that, if you were to wind all the way back to the beginnings, what did that look like for yourself? Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit more about your family from the beginning.
I was born in a little town called Cheviot, which is just North Canterbury. So that probably, I don't know what it is nowadays, an hour and a half north of Christchurch. And then grew up in a little town called Whitewater, which is 20 minutes north of Christchurch, but I really identify as somebody from North Canterbury, not Canterbury or the metro Christchurch. And then grew up there till 18 years old and then left home and went on a bit of an adventure. I learned how to whitewater kayak at high school in year 13, I guess, in 7th form. And although I didn't really think much of the time, I really enjoyed it. But I went to university because I always wanted to go to university. I went in Dunedin and I enjoyed what I did, but I didn't really work towards anything that I thought I should. But all I wanted to do was go kayaking, so I went kayaking on the weekends. And so just on a whim after the first year of university, I went and joined an adventure guiding outdoor leadership course in Greymouth, Port Tinney, and went there and just kayaked a couple of years and did outdoor guiding and outdoor leadership and got lots of outdoor skills. And then to keep kayaking, I learned that I had to be a raft guide. So then I moved to Rotorua when I was 20 years old to be a raft guide and trained up on the Kaituna River, which just happens to be 15 minutes from where I'm sitting there. And then once I trained up and kept on living my dream to kayak and then started traveling, and we're back in those days when you're a rafting guide, you would raft in the summers and you could travel the winters and work in other countries. And back at, the US dollar was quite strong back in those days. So you'd actually make some okay cash, for somebody of that age. And I went to Whistler in British Columbia in Canada. That was the first place I worked. And then just fell in love with that area and continued my dream of kayaking. The kayaking was amazing, super steep, like really steep alpine type rivers. And then continued to be a commercial raft guide and then traveled to and from New Zealand for a little bit and then so which Central America, other places in the US and I'd always travel to the whitewater kayaking, run rivers and whatever. And then as time goes on, you meet somebody and have children and then we moved back here. My wife's British actually. We moved back here in 2017, just on a bit of a whim for this job. And then, definitely some tumultuous moments with COVID and all that. So we probably didn't think we'd be here as long as we have, but we're still here now, strong and right today.
Lovely. It seems like a right around the world and back again for you.
Yeah, it was quite strange. It was really serendipitous like that. The taking this job, even finding out this job, we weren't looking to move to New Zealand and we had a really cold winter. Like we were in Whistler in Canada. We actually lived in Pemberton, which was 20 minutes north, and the temperature was usually like it was about +1, -10, which that's where it fluctuated. And which was fine, like it was well livable. But we had a really cold winter, lots of Arctic outflows, -20s, and it's just in a really long winter. We usually had a really nice spring where we lived. And my wife was like, we're lying to bed. She's like, let's move to New Zealand. She's like, let's move to New Zealand.
So had she been here before, or because you said you met?
We met in New Zealand. We met in Queenstown.
Oh, right. Yes.
She just did a season there. We just randomly happened to sort of live in the same area. But then on the third time she said it, I opened up my phone and went tourism management jobs, and then this job popped up, and it was like the job description was written for me. It was so serendipitous. So I applied, and the next day, and then the gentleman, this guy named James Gerard, replied back and said, "Oh, please, that's really nice to hear from you. We're actually going to be in Pemberton next week. We could come and meet you." And I was like, so I Googled New Zealand. I Googled, is there a Pemberton in New Zealand? And there's one in Taranaki. And so I replied and said, hey, that'd be amazing. Just double checking that it's Pemberton, British Columbia, Canada, and not Pemberton, Taranaki. And he said, no. And so he was there the week later. And it turned out his brother actually lived in this small town of 2,000 people that I lived in that I didn't know. He had just moved there. And so it was awesome. So I got to meet James and his founding colleague, Andrew. And then it was really nice. And then I'd been here for ages and I kind of forgot about it and didn't even care anymore. But then, they did another interview and I got the job and we moved to New Zealand.
So you came back here, and so your role obviously was it the same role you came right into?
Yeah, similar. Like over there, I was running ecotourism businesses, ziplining, whitewater rafting, snowshoeing, treetop adventures, ATVing, snowmobiling. So quite an array of ecotourism businesses. Activities within a business, and it's very similar stuff. Here, just coming to this role, I really liked, you could really see from the website in there, you can see the concept of the organization was really environmental and people focused, which both things I really liked. And so I felt like it's a really nice role. And more elevated, more not more senior by title, but definitely more senior by control, like the organization over there was bigger, it had, had a marketing team, it had finance team, et cetera. Where this was just like, just do everything. So that probably appealed.
And you talked a little bit about the environmental side of things, and I'm really curious, where in your life did that interest peak for you, and how did that come about?
That's a good question. Yeah, I don't really know. Like I've never had formal training in that space. I've just always been interested, maybe I'm just cynical, just knowing that all these problems that we have were never going to go away. So I was always really interested in it. And in North America and Canada, I already, we just live in this beautiful area with incredible mountains and trees. But there was no real conservation drive, but in some ways the sustainability over there was everybody was so much more aware, the recycling and the composting and you go to the recycling center, you split your recycling 16 ways, even just as a household. Like you didn't have bins on the side of the road because you had bears that would eat your rubbish, so you eat your garbage, so you couldn't do that. So, but even when you go to the landfill, you'd get your truck of garbage or whatever, rubbish, and you'd have to split up your drywall and your tires and your metal and woods. And so there's kind of definitely more advanced than just that awareness. And probably just something I've just known it's important, and I've known that you can't hide from it because nothing's ever going to get better. It's only going to get worse, right?
Totally. And in terms of your parents, what were they like? Were they doing anything in outdoors, or what was their background like?
The old man, he was a farmer, and he was very much into the outdoors, but there's nothing really structured in our family. We grew up playing sports. I love rugby since I was a tiny little kid, so we just played rugby. And my parents were great in terms of giving us opportunities in terms of would drive us to every sport we wanted to do and things like that. But there's no structured outdoory type activity as a family. I grew up in a I think, considered now a bigger family. We had I have 5 other siblings. And so I think now I'm a parent too, like you've definitely got to keep your stick on the ice to keep a family of 6 going, So I think they did the best they could in that sense. But, the love for kayaking and now like riding bikes and all that was just maybe just the love for being active and doing things that were kind of, exciting every day,
Something you sort of fell into as you grew up?
Yeah. I guess, when I was kayaking, like I just had this crazy drive to go kayaking. We were, paddling 250 days a year and it was all I wanted to do. And then the rafting just supported that, it was just a way to make money and travel around the world. It was, I just had this insatiable need to keep going boating. And then when, you get good, I guess whatever the good is, but, you run hard rivers and when you are running harder rivers, you got to keep running harder rivers because when you stop running harder rivers, you kind of lose your touch a little bit. And at Worcester in particular, the rivers are really steep, really cold, and just full of trees that were kind of like this strains. They would be kind of dangerous because the rivers here are quite young, but the coast mountains were a very young mountain range. And so you kind of had to be on the ball because running steep, hard, cold rivers was something you had to do it every day because you couldn't just, do it once a month. So then you just kind of lose your edge.
So what did that training look like for yourself on a day-to-day basis, and how did you sort of build that up?
I think you're just always fit. When you're a raft guide, you sit in the back of a raft, you're tuning rafts. Like you've got a raft that could be 16, 17, 18 feet long with 6, 7, 8 people in it. So it could weigh, half a ton. Or the boat. The boat itself will weigh 50, 60 kgs. So you just get really strong just sitting in a boat and just exercising all day. But essentially, if you're guiding rafts for 4 or 5 hours a day, it's just resistance training. And then the kite is just very similar motions. But you just get really strong core, you get strong back and shoulders, and when you're young too, right, you can just handle it. Well, I can handle it now still, but the consistency, nowadays has been most of my time sitting on my posterior, right? And you've got to make a real effort to exercise and to live a lifestyle that anywhere near was as active as, for that 10 years.
Totally. And so then obviously from there, you've done quite a few roles. I'm really curious because you took up a job in the running of the adventure groups, but by the time you left Canada in the tourism side, was there a main thing about the role that you're in right now that made you say yes?
I think there's probably a couple of things, right? Like I've always liked working, and I guess it's a bit to a negative. I've always made working a high priority. I think I get that from my dad, who worked incredibly hard his whole life. Like my old man, he's a farmer, and then he worked for the council in farms, and he retired when he was 65, like you'll do it. I remember my mum bought him all these jigsaw puzzles, and he sat in the lounge, and he was like, it just looked so depressing. So he went and put an ad in the newspaper and looking for like landscaping and gardening work. And then he started this little business that he ran. He would have worked till he was like 88. So my parents are a little bit older. They had me when they met late, and they had me. I was the youngest of the six. But he would have worked till his late 80s. So I've probably got a bit of that in me, and then just that real drive to grow. Like I really want, and I like people and I like environment, and this business kind of had those 3 things. Like full sort of autonomy of an organization, but then with people and the environment at the forefront. So like I've always been quite I'd say a cultural leader. Like I really like people. I think having a big family, being part of the big family, and that transition into rafting, because with rafting you meet people all day, every day. And not only do you meet them, you get them and you put them inside of a raft, and then you've got to build a rapport instantly, and then you've got to teach them how to get you down the river safely. And you've got to do it within sometimes seconds, but sometimes minutes. And so I think you just get really good. Well, so I think, right, you just have really good people skills, and you just really learn to connect. And that's always been a drive. And then culturally, I've always thought that people should be at the forefront of this stuff. And being in tourism and adventure tourism, like the people are actually the assets. So they're the product. A lot of businesses forget that. So I've always kind of lived that. And in an employee type role, it's kind of hard. But if your values don't align with the owners or the shareholders, whatever, that within this business, they did, and I really got it. Like with Canopy Tours, like Canopy Tours is just zip lines, right? Zip lines in a forest, but it's, zip lines make up 3 minutes, but the people make up the rest. And so understanding that the humans are actually the stars of the show, and that these people are young, so you give them the tools and so they understand what they're doing, but you just got to allow them to be themselves so they can deliver the product. And then it's the intangible stuff for us. People come from zip lines, but they don't believe go zip line. They've lived zip line, they're amazing. They go, oh my God, the staff and the forest are incredible. So, and it's awesome because it's all free. Like all that stuff's free. It's just actually seeing as a priority. And I don't think many people in tourism really get that.
Yeah, and then that's very unique because often you go out into a activity and it's very activity focused, whereas for you, it's quite unique in the sense that you actually get the nature vibe and you also get to work within the adventure side as well, which is quite unique for a tourism type activity. So I'm really curious. You mentioned quite a few things in that, so I just want to unpack that a little bit. So in terms of the company itself, the structure for our listeners, just so they can understand how is it all made up.
So I'm the CEO of the RCT Group. The RCT Group has a couple of businesses underneath it. Rotorua Canopy Tours, which is a zipline business based in Rotorua, New Zealand, and then the $1 Million Cruise, which is a sightseeing business, which is a vessel, so boat business in Queenstown. And we've just added the Canyon Explorers, actually, which is a canyoning business, but also based in Queenstown. And Rotorua Canopy Tours is, a series of zip lines and bridges in an old growth native forest. We have 2 courses, 6 zip lines. And zip lines up to 200 meters long, kids as young as 6, people as old as 90, whatever. And then we have the ultimate canopy tour, which is kids as young as 10. Zip lines up to 400 meters long. One's 2.5 hours, one's 3 hours. Both experiences are 10 people and 2 guides, so pretty kind of bespoke, premium. And then we run the experiences. We don't just put tour on top of tour. We have them far enough apart that you never see each other in the forest. And when you go on this journey in the forest, every feature you go to, you turn a corner and you can't see where you've been, and you also don't know where you're going. So the whole thing's about, and this kind of journey starts at the base, but the whole thing's around making people feel important. So we treat people really well. We learn their names. We're really, we're really professional. We're really polite. The marketing's good. The imagery's good. The vehicles are nice, the vehicles are clean, the gear is good, like all that stuff. We make people feel important. And then we get them onto the course and we show them the forest because, the forest is an ancient old growth forest. It's, we say it's 1,000 years old, but it's actually not. It's 11,000 years, but we can probably talk about that. And there was done, 12 years of restoration work. So the underlayer is healthy, the forest layer is healthy, the birds, there's so many birds that we feed them from our hands. We have all the wildlife disruption, just by the way. But it's about make them know, we make them aware how unique their environment is because there's no other forest in the country like that of that age with that much pest control. And when they realize that the uniqueness of the forest, and then you get them at hikes, they get, they get out of the comfort zones and they connect with themselves, with each other, with the guides, and also with nature. And then through the experience, we talk about the biodiversity process, and it's not a geeky conservation delivery, but we really do it in a way that's really nice and natural. And we sort of show them the challenges, the bird feeding really helps. And then we tell them our story, which is kind of coming to this forest, removing, thousands of pest predators essentially. And then the results are X and Y. And then they get emphatic by that. We donate, we're the trust we run alongside the business, the Canopy Conservation Trust, and we donate on their behalf into that trust, and that trust actually pays for all the conservation work. So when they know that they're part of the journey, it's just like another spike of emotion. It's kind of the way we see it. It's we have all these positive spikes of emotion. We have these positive deliverables that they don't expect, which creates memories. It connects the memories to this experience, which then creates word of mouth and a really nice a really nice engagement and positive experience.
Beautiful. And in terms of the trust versus the company, what does the structure look like in terms of the board and who's managing those different aspects of it?
Yeah, so we it's unique. Well, I don't know if it's unique or not, but it's the trust is Rotorua Canopy Tours. We do a bunch of conservation work, and then and we not done out this role. And we pay Department of Conservation, so the government, for the use of the land. It's the Department of Conservation land. It's the ancestral lands of Ngāti Tū to Ngāti Tanaka. The section that we use is administered by by DOC and the Sydney Reserves Board. So we, as part of our lease agreement with DOC, we have to pay 6% of our revenue, top line, to DOC for the use of the land. And so the money goes to DOC and then off to our agent to pay for all things DOC, right? Which is great. But we asked, quite a few years ago, we asked them to keep the money and if we could use it for conservation work locally. And they said, no. But eventually, after asking a few times, after a couple of years, they brought up an accountant into the forest and walked around, with shiny shoes, and they probably never walked into a forest before. But he agreed to let us to work with him in a unique way. So that's when we had the first partnership agreement with DOC out of 4,200 concessionaires. And what we did is we paid our fees to DOC, 6% of top line, but in return they gave us $35,000 back. But we had to match that $35,000 and it had to go into a trust. And this was in 2015. So that's when the Canopy Conservation Trust was born. And so with that trust, we had essentially $70,000 a year that we could then, and this agreement was for 3 years. And so then through the period prior, we'd been doing manual trapping. And it was good, but it was effective, but it was really labor intensive. So then we partnered with Good Nature, which is they do automatic traps. They're based in Wellington, a human company. They do automatic traps. So, they're rat traps that kind of self-reset, and then they can remove up to 24 rats through one period. They have little baits that kind of squeeze out over 6-month periods, and they have like a gas canister that powers them. Then they have a possum trap, which is kind of similar, but you can remove 12 animals. But the conservation, so the doc with the partnership agreement allowed us to spend a couple of $100,000 essentially on buying a honey, 700 Good Nature traps to run through the forest, and the labour to support that, and the consumables. So ever since then, we've got some time of self-resetted traps that's been really effective. So the Conservation Trust paid down. So post the partnership agreement, Canopy Tours donates $1 per customer into the trap, and then into the trust, and more recently it's been $1.50. And then the customers also donate money when they come through if they're passionate by, we have a wristband, they can donate for a wristband, or they can just, donate money into the trust. And so last year I think it's been about $70,000 on conservation. Usually it's around between 50 and 70. I think this year will be about 70. We're doing more and more stuff with really good partners. So in terms of the makeup, Rotorua Canopy Tours have board, as you'd imagine, and then we have the Conservation Trust also has trustees. They actually happen to be the two of the trustees go from both sides to the other, but the conference are really well managed and also very transparent through the Conservation Trust website.
That's very unique, actually, in terms of how you actually work with the Conservation Trust, but also DOC as well. So that's quite a two-layered approach there, isn't it?
It's really cool that the DOC. Well, in some ways it's not cool. In some ways it's cool. Like we're a model concessionaire, right? Like we take this land that had no strategic value for them, and we've made it healthy. The challenge is that we pay 6% for revenue, but we but then we also have the pleasure of spending whatever we spend, like $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 on restoring the land for it. But DOC, like, they do their best, right? And within local office, we've got really good contacts. With the national, we've got really good contacts. And what's kind of unique with the trust with us is that Canopy Tours is merely a contractor to the trust. The trust tells the trust sort of outlines what the conservation work would like to do every year, and then the Canopy Tours says, hey, we can do that. We can be your mechanism, and we just, the Canopy Tours staff do all the mahi, and in return they just pass their wages. The trust pays their wages at cost. There's no admin fees, or there's no smoke and mirrors. Essentially, the trust gets a really good deal. And then within the trust, my time, the vehicles to the forest, like all that stuff's just covered pro bono. We don't pass it on. We just only pass the frontline labour.
And so someone listening to this will probably be thinking, how do you actually measure ROI on the returns? So for someone thinking, you're talking about a business on this side and then there's a trust on the other side. What are your key measures for that, and how do you go about doing that?
When I think about Canopy Tours, it's definitely easier being out of the business than in the business. Like, we've got a really strong reputation. We run X amount of clients a year. Like, the business makes money and it all works. And but it takes a lot of energy and effort because it's around recruiting the right people. It's around getting the right cultures, leading with values, a vision, mission, and a value set. It takes a lot of energy and effort to get it right, but a lot of it's a touchy-feely stuff. But when I think about the biodiversity work, like, it comes from the board and the CEO, and it gets jammed all the way through the organization, through the guides, through the customer experience team, into the customers. Like, it's a culture. We create a culture that customers feel. And it's really genuine because, I think it's genuine. It's really genuine because it's real. The staff do the conservation mahi. And when we hire people on values because we want the right people within the organization. And a lot of our staff are just impassioned by taking clients into that forest and showing them how, the difference and the uniqueness of an ancient old growth forest. And you really see that come through the reviews and then I guess then the word of mouth and the return visitation. And we're a high yielding product, I think, for tourism, for guided tourism, particularly in the North Island. When you read the reviews, they're just so emotional and detailed and engaging, and people, they always respond. They always mention their guiding peer by name, and it's not like, hey, 5 out of 5, great job. It's really quite empowering, and it makes you feel really proud when you read the reviews. And I think that's kind of like the result of all of this, really taking care of the details and really holding this conservation biodiversity stuff in such a high regard. It builds a brand, it builds recruitment, it builds marketing, it's content, it's all those things. And we guess on top of that, it's more real.
That's right. Yeah. And if anyone is listening and thinking about the financial side, how has anyone ever suggested to you or your team around cutting conservation budget?
No, and I guess from a shareholder position, you could quite easily look at it and just go, hey, well, why don't we just take that for ourselves and then drive to raise the money from our customers? Because to be fair, we don't do a great job on that because we haven't really articulated our goals to really share our goals to get by. But I think everybody would just quit. I think it would be so disingenuous and just lose your staff. Because I think from a governance level, you've got to walk the talk. I feel so strongly like a fish rocks from the head. If you've heard that saying, like all culture comes from top down. And if it's not real from the top down, then it's only a matter of time before people get it. But people are smart. Like we hire young staff, but they're also really smart.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And this sort of brings me to my next question around this. And obviously you guys are B Corp certified and actually first ones in Rotorua, which is quite a big credit to your organization as well. And just for our listeners who are thinking, what did the certification process look like for yourself? And also what was the driver behind that?
We're very proud to be B Corp. It's something I hold in high regard. And I guess for the motivation was, Canopy Tours is really well known for the biodiversity work and the conservation work. But the thing about the B Corp's actually like, your governance, how you look after the community, your people, the environment, your supply chain and all that stuff, and how you look after people. And we do such a good job on all of those things, but we never get recognized for that. Canopy Tours, we were donating $100,000 of product a year to community groups and PTAs and all that carrying on. We really look after our staff really well, benefits and flexible working and just, we have value sets, we have a vision, most people do, the mission and then behavioral values, but we have emotional values. So we have emotions that we want our staff to feel and we use that base for driving behavioral values and then mission and vision. So we go up, down. I don't know if there's any other company that I know of in New Zealand that does that. So the motivation around B Corp was two things. One, because to really prove that we are well-rounded. And two, because I think, speak loosely, I think sometimes people can greenwash, right? Or their motivation with their conservation biodiversity work or their regenerative work cannot be that true, particularly in tourism. I think in tourism, there's a bit of pressure to always do something that's regenerative. And so for me, Canopy Tours, when we first started, we led with sustainability first and people thought it was weird. They didn't understand it. But now, trapping a pest or planting a tree is normal. But every tourism business does that. So it's about raising the tide. And I really see Canopy Tours' role in raising the tide in tourism. And so, we always want to be the best because, that's really one of my drivers is it's not about being better. It's actually just striving to be as good as you possibly can. And by raising the tide, by getting a B Corp, it means everyone doesn't have to get a B Corp, but you don't, it doesn't matter if you're second or third because, we're first in the area with it, but you don't want to be last. So you want people to be thinking it and then raising the tide with you. And then when you're, and you go through the B Corp, there's such a good learning process. You really look at all different parts of your organization and it makes you so much better. And then for us to be the first was really motivating to be the first because then you get the PR and you kind of get to jump all that carry on. And to be the first business of any industry we're up to do is really cool, but it's also a bit embarrassing.
No, that's well, congratulations firstly for leading that. And I think that is really cool. Obviously there's a lot more people now, but there's still a lot of work to be done because I don't think there is enough in the tourism sector, that's for sure.
No, I think there's 5 now in tourism and there's still not another B Corp for Rotorua region. We're still the only one.
Oh, you're still the only one in Rotorua, yeah.
Still the only one. There's 189 B Corps, I think, in New Zealand. And this, the B Corp lead was just here the other day thinking we're going to make us an exemplar B Corp, which is incredible.
And you touched quite a lot on the values part. Obviously, that's quite a big part of a CEO role. And it's also something that anyone in the for-purpose sector always has to juggle between, we talked about the money side and we also talked about the values side. So I want to come back to your own personal values. And if you had to just pick 3 values that you live by, what are they? Not on the walls of your office, but the ones that you yourself anchor on. And why are those 3 important to you?
Whether it's a value or not, I think just being really genuine. People that are themselves or not themselves today with you or with me, but themselves every day, like people that, and consistency is a really strong value to me. I just think that genuine deliverable has to be consistent to be real. And I think a lot of people don't get that. And I guess probably, and I'm not being cheesy or anything, but just about kind of really trying to excel, And I live in this world, which is probably awful, but you've always got to be better, like really self-critical, It's just when something happens, you're like, oh, yeah, sweet, but how could you improve it? I guess, kayaking and all that stuff, like I've just got a really analytical mind and it doesn't stop. So you're really just analyzing what you do. So I think that thing about always trying to be the best, and like when when you're in a business and people are like, hey, this is our vision is to be engaging and whatever, and you're just like, oh, you're really loud, I give a shit about that. So do you want to be the best? Oh yes, wait, yeah, cool, let's go, right? Yes, I think that would probably be it. And I think just in general, like probably my biggest mistake is being or maybe my strongest trait has been incredibly rosy in my thinking, so
Optimistic?
I don't see barriers, I just think, like as a human, you're only restricted by your mind. And so it means I embark on incredible projects sometimes with no consideration of the process, which is awesome because, if you aim to the stars, if you're gonna crash, you're still gonna crash pretty high. So sometimes with home renovation work and like I like doing like, bishop running and bike and stuff like that, but you just end up doing charging to these incredible things that were actually, they shouldn't be able to claim it. We just managed to figure it out because you're just so bloody rosy.
Have you ever had to ground yourself and defend your values in order not to give up on your values in any situation? And how do you do that for yourself?
I guess there's got to be times, right? Like, you can take a strong moral position at work, or I don't know. I guess it's kind of the one thing, you pick your battles, right? When you're, if something really doesn't sit right, you go pretty hard. And then in the working sense, you choose, like, well, do you want to be part of that organization or work with that supplier? Then at home, I guess you just got to assess the risk reward. Like if you're going to get stuck in and really defend a position, what's the, you got to make sure the outcomes after you're going to be happy with the potential outcome, positive or negative. Yes, otherwise, it's a good question on that. I'm pretty cruisy, right? Like I'm pretty, I grew up with a family of six. I was the last one. Like, you just get bounce around bit of the post line, very, very laid back. So I kind of just bounce around in that sense.
I can totally relate. I was also the youngest in my family, not six, cool. But I definitely relate to the having to, bounce around and navigate your way through.
Were you the favorite?
I would like to think so.
One thing I like about being the youngest is that all of their standards are dropped so low because they're so over. Like, exactly. Yeah, I remember my sister, you just do what you want yourself. Okay. Then it's like, we don't care.
Well, I think we do that with family too, right? Like your first child, you sort of really focus and follow the rules. And by the time you get your second or third, it's kind of all relaxed as well. I'm just thinking in terms of, we talked a little bit about your values, but also in your own business decision making. Have you had a cost benefit analysis or something where there was a cost to deciding, but you went ahead anyway because you wanted to protect your organization or your own personal values from an ethical perspective?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, the ethics in this, probably a lot, right? Like the ethics in this organization are quite strong, although probably not written down. But we'll work with suppliers and not based on, if we have customers, probably an example is if you have the customers that are not polite or not nice, like we don't want to work with them, right? Or if you have people that have different views on mixed races or anything like that, like in a heartbeat, we don't care. Like, we do not want to work with people that are not nice and are not very nice to our staff or racist or anything like that, So we, in that sense, it's probably just always ongoing, although we don't have a code of ethics as such. But I don't know, I think you judge people on pretty small interactions, right? And if someone's not aligned to you, then we don't work with them. But if they are aligned, then it's just game on, right? Like my style is very much trust you don't. I'm so trusting. And then the moment that people take advantage of that, then it's just the barriers up. Like you're not going to engage them at all, And probably with staff too, right? Like I think staff-wise, our standards for visitor experience is so high, but it's not about the standards of visitor experience. It's just about standards of behaviour. Our values are so high that if as soon as we're not aligned or they're not, like one of our behavioural values is making every interaction count, and that's in the staff room, that's on tour, that's when you're driving a car. Like it's about every interaction of every point of every day. And this interaction, right? It's interaction with the staff members when I wake up. It's all that stuff, eh? So it's and that's the thing. If staff aren't living that valley, like I'm not saying to go on, there's HR laws. It's not negotiable. We'll manage people out of the business just based on our value set.
That's very powerful. And is any of this down to some of that long races that you did? Do you think some of that thread is all the way across as well in your leadership, the way that you handle some of these situations?
Yeah, the thing with doing long races or long events or to put in context is, like running 100 miles or, going 17, 18 hours in the forest running or I guess 7 or 8 days doing things like God's Zone. It's not, I don't know. I quite like it because it's how you think. Like it really, obviously there's fitness factor and there's a fueling factor. Like it's how you fuel your body and how you control your outputs. But the reality is it's actually about how your brain goes and it makes you think. And it's really cool how the stuff you think about when you're really pushed. But then to relate that to in a business sense, I think it's probably just the consistency, knowing that you've just got to do this every single day. And I think a lot of leadership is actually not leadership. It's just about being present. Like if I'm here, like who's leading the organization? But if I am here, like what am I doing to lead it? Like you're actually just being present. And through, through these emotional values that we have, and we worked with a guy actually that came through around COVID doing an emotional value workshop. And it was an incredible, probably the most powerful day it'll be ever as a manager. But what I learned that day was the best thing to do as a boss is just to be kind and create an environment where people come every day and they just know that they're safe and people know who they are. And the best thing I can do is every day is just say hello to the girl. You're good, you're sweet. And because everyone's got something going on, but just having a place where they know they can just relax and their values actually them as a human is really important. So probably to relate that back to your question is, it's probably just it's a consistency piece. It's an endurance sport is around consistency, right? It's not about what you do some of the time. It's about what you do most of the time. And I think as a boss, it's just about that. It's about being consistent, leading by example. I sure you have a bad day, but sometimes you can show it, sometimes you can't. But just being there and rubbing shoulders with people and just be like, because then when they know that you believe in them and you believe in the organization and you believe in the values, and then they behave as trained when you're not there. And that's the stuff, like some of the stuff we on tour, like we did this tour group the other day, is a Chinese travel agent. They're a group of travel agents from the eastern seaboard of Australia that they sold Chinese tourism. Like our guides are out there. And I heard about it, I got this email saying, hey, we just had this amazing time. And which is quite normal, because we always exceed, people are so stoked, right? Because it's an emotional experience. Well, this is just incredible. Our guys are out there, these people, they're all singing Māori songs to the Chinese group singing songs back to them. And then one of our guys sings a Chinese song to this Chinese group that they all know. And I'll get all these videos. It was just incredible, So you're creating this experience that I would say it's life-changing. It's a memorable moment in people's lives. And it's just because they give a shit. And then I just think my job was to be present to know that I care about them. They give a shit about them. And then they give a shit about the organization. Sorry for the shit. So they care about the organization and they care about making every interaction count and they care about the customers that they're with. Like it's just about being present with the people around you.
And that is so powerful because a lot of the times, these types of emotional factors, generally they get put up on a wall and you don't really see that lived culture coming through. And what you're describing right now is exactly that, which is, you don't have to have it on the wall. You can actually experience it. And the way that you actually measure that is actually from those videos that you're getting and also all of that experience all around you, people just lighting up. So that is very powerful. And often we underestimate the power of actually observing around in our own environment.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's the stuff's got to come to life and it's got to be real. And not many people do it well. And we can do it way better, right? I know that. But we do the best we can. One of our values, bid never stops, is just doing the best you can. Owning another value, owning it, just own it, be real. And then, keep working every day. You want to be better, but you just know that you're not going to be the best way. But it's an incredible process. Like it's I just don't think people in tourism. I don't think people do it that well. Eh?
Totally. And sometimes it's like having a magic wand, which is actually go back to the fundamentals, isn't it?
I just like it's just you go do these incredible tourism experiences. You go and some infrastructure with $10 million, but if you don't have good service, you just leave feeling empty. You're just a number. Like you're not. No one's engaging with you because all humans, all we crave for is just connection, right? We just want someone to look at us and go, hey, kia ora, it's really nice to see you. Come back again. Hope you enjoyed it. You okay this, sir? You're like, yeah, I'm good. I really appreciate you acknowledging me, right? You spend $5 million on a zipline course, but the reality is what people want is actually just someone to be nice to them.
With everything that you've described, the conservation, the cost, the team, the kaupapa, what is the bottleneck right now for you guys in terms of when you're looking ahead?
Yeah, I guess like on a business side, the bottleneck is, we just need more people, things aren't bad at all. I think it's great. But, you're always striving to run more numbers and keep your team busier and driving that way. I think in the biodiversity side of things, we're actually, to be fair, it's actually quite a cool bottleneck. We were working on carbon sequestration studies in the soils of ancient native forests. So, people measure carbon in a tree, right? They measure the trunk and the foliage and they fly LIDAR technology around to measure it. But what no one's doing is measuring the earth. And, 95% of the activity of a tree or the success of a tree health is actually underground. Like it's all through the biomass of the soils. And so I kind of found this out and through going to a conference actually in Wellington 50 years ago. But they talked about the majority of carbon sequestering in the soils. But and the Canopy Tours have got this 500 hectares block that's docked, and half of it is restored and half of it is not. So we operating the restored side. We hadn't done the whole side just because we didn't have a resource yet. But one side's had 12 years pest control, one side hasn't. But the magic is the pest control, rats and deers and goats and possums eat the underland. And so on the side with the pest control, the underland's flourishing. Like in some areas it's 12 to 15 feet high. And most forests you go to New Zealand, the underland is just hammered. But so anyway, I'll get to my point in a second, sorry. So we part of Canterbury University, and with the volcanology team, we'll be measuring the carbon levels in the soils of both sides. But what we've discovered, is that up to 40% of the ground and the restored side is actually made up of carbon, and in the non-restored side, it's around 5 to 8%.
Oh, wow. That's a huge difference in numbers.
Potentially. So the hypothesis is if New Zealand was free, we could be carbon neutral. Right? Like we've got these forests with the potential to soak in gigatons of carbon if they were healthy. The back to the bottleneck is we've been using students. We have really good, we have high-level professors, we have high-level equipment, but we're using students. They actually come from the US mainly on semester, they'll do semester exchanges, and then they'll come to our project and they'll go to Canterbury University and then, work and live a couple of semesters and go home. And then they'll pass the project on to the next group. So we've just had the soil inventory project from the US, from upstate New York. So it's a soil carbon organization that measures soil carbons all through the US. And it's funded by the Bezos Foundation and the Al Gore Foundation. So heavily funded. And, the best soil scientists in the country and in the US. But they've just come over and then done full sort of what you consider international standard data gathering. And so where our bottleneck is we're waiting for the data to get back to see if we are actually onto something with the consistencies of international standard. And then we can be fully aggressive and fund, looking for funding for the project. Because, right now, I think we run our project on 50 to 70K a year, but this would need $500,000 a year at least to get scientists, PhD students, full-time, full intensive pest control, and then to extend it through to other areas like in the Clyde-Bummerford areas where they've got like tree sets that have, 0%, 5%, 0%, 0 year, or 5 year, or 8 year pest control. But we can actually fully prove to New Zealand that if we, these elements where if we were pretty free would have a lot of carbon to sequester, which would potentially have huge, it could be hugely beneficial to New Zealand and native forest landowners, because right now there's limited ways to get a naval forest.
That sounds like you're on the verge of a breakthrough right there. And in terms of the people that would then come and work here, does New Zealand have enough of a skill set? You mentioned that the students have been from overseas.
Yeah, we've been doing it that way because we do it on the smell of an oily rag. Because the volcanologist, this guy Darren, he actually facilitates the students through. So they through as environmental science students, so they're quite well apt to work in the dirt. But in New Zealand, we definitely do, because what we would do is we would have, so like Scion we've got Scion local, and there's some incredible carbon experts there in native forests. There's been a lot of work done with the ZIP, which is a project down in Southwestland, which they're doing incredible jobs with pest control and also with finding ways to measure carbon to essentially sell it to create revenue. And then we would focus on, these high-level scientists that essentially will cost a lot of money, and supporting them with PhD students. Like there's interest from like the Waimangu, because that area had the, Tarawera, the Tarawera eruption in 1860-ish. And it's that means we've got days there, so we can measure on the carbon from, essentially for the last 160 years, sort of thing. 1880, sorry. But so anyway, we do have it. And then in terms of people on the grounds and management control, I think it's a really good labour set for this area, to get people into the land and into Whenua and restoring it, and like it's incredible. And then as a tourist proposition, like imagine if the Rotorua Canopy was predator free, like drive into Rotorua and there'd be birds flying and just be this incredible tourism.
Oh, that would be amazing, isn't it? Predator free. Yeah, absolutely.
And if you can make money from restoring forests, well, I think New Zealand would be predator free in 6 months. You just, the government just like funnel money into it and get it going, especially if you're making money over there, right? It'll be like finding gold,
Oh, totally. Especially that we are so lucky to be rich in so much native forest in New Zealand compared to many other countries. So that's definitely a big win for us. Before I let you go, I want to ask you, if anyone is listening and want to follow you, where can they follow you, and what's the best place to see your work?
Oh, that's really funny to suggest that. Like I sit on LinkedIn, so I've got a profile there you can attack. I'm not that active on LinkedIn, but I always check my messages. And then, Rotorua Canopy Tours, Paul at canopytours.co.nz. Big on emails, we're always on the email. And then, Facebook and all that carry on. But I'm not that big on the socials. I think I'm too old.
Paul, thank you so much for today. I think we covered quite a lot of ground, and I think the work that you're doing is very special. It's a very rare business model, and I love the kaupapa that you're all working towards. So thank you so much for sharing some of your work and also your wisdom.
I really appreciate it. And just before I go, I just want to acknowledge Ngāti Tuta Ngāti Tamako for our, manawhina of the Daisy Rose Scenic Reserve, the area that we do our conservation kaupapa for access to their ancestral lands, and also being incredibly supportive as partners through the process.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation and got as much out of it as I did. As always, if this episode speaks to you, please like, share, and subscribe to Care Beyond Profits. I appreciate you, and until next time, keep caring beyond profits.